internally there is a variation, the changes started to take place, and that is different from individual to individual. And also it is a population effect there as well. For example, SARS-CoV-2 infected individuals are removed by law or by practice or by tradition from the population, and these quarantine practices, contact tracing, isolation, lockdowns, they're all population effects. I mean, now we have these terms for this. Earlier, the young leader, or putting like Colombo, branch in front of the house and self quarantine. These all they were there. So that actually the intelligent population controls that we had, and then the community effects, wildlife hunting, wildlife trade, deforestation. All these actually has this community effect of consumer resource interactions, and invasive species, something that normally not so commonly discussed. Invasive species could push viruses and pathogens and into new territories, and push boundaries of certain pathogens, especially along the elevational gradient, like species that are otherwise only found in lowlands, now found in the mountains, where mountain organisms are not has the capacity to
I
handle.
need to.
So those come into play as well. And then the spatial ecology, the space related. In the individual context, the differential expression of ACE2, the receptor, the differential expression of certain immune functions, and then the host tissue characteristics and source sink metapopulation effects, they all play a role within the organism in the immune and pathological context. Similarly, in the population level, a lack of coordinated policy, that, in the context of isolation, in the context of quarantine, and then the effects of dynamics and undermines efforts to reduce the incidence, and then the testing, diagnostics, the facilities, the global differences in the capacity in the context of vaccination, they all come into this spatial ecology, variations in capacity. And then the community. Anthropogenic landscape changes increases the range overlap between bats, intermediate hosts, and humans. Another thing which is not covered here is traditional practices. Certain countries, people are more prone to have pets, more prone to have poultry and interactions with animals than certain other cultures, and certain cultures are more carnivory compared to certain other cultures. So all these come into play in this context. And finally, to avoid too much repetition, diversity and adaptations. So the viruses adaptations and how it would respond, and then how the immunization program in the population level would affect, especially the independent appearance of the advantageous mutations, and how that would spread across the globe, and so on. And then the community level variations, like acquisition of furin and recognized motifs the viral outer covering, and how that would affect the spillovers into other hosts, secondary temporary hosts, and the variations that they could capture in the process, or the burrowing traits, genomic and phenotypic traits in the context of this new host, because we are a new host. It's a population explosion for the SARS-CoV-2 virus right now, and what would its future in the context of a global distribution of the virus, thanks to humans' very large population size. So all these come into play in these different scales. So how the evolutionary controls of viral diversity would affect? So the paper says that the genetic diversity accumulates over time in many generations through mutations and recombination, and then the frequency varies across viral lineages. And most RNA viruses have a remarkably high mutation rate, which is a bad news. The good news is that SARS-CoV-2 and beta coronaviruses as a whole utilizes a high fidelity RNA proofreading mechanisms, which reduces the occurrence of the mutations. And also another small, to me, I think it's a bad news, but I think in most cases, it's been considered as a good news story where coronaviruses are fairly big. So the big means your rate of divergence is a little bit slow and you are a bigger organism or you are a more complex organism. Complex organisms are slow to evolve. But I think the bad news in that context is that uh, because of that, coronavirus would not go away soon because it has so many close related other coronaviruses in the system, and also it is very stable. Uh, so, so that gives the population genetic mechanisms into the picture, where for example, the gene flow, genetic drift, that modulate the genetic diversity of these viruses within the host population. Despite the vast ecological opportunity posed by this recent zoonotic jump, because this virus is trapped in a bat. Bats, for some reason, it's a kind of a very interesting group of animals where lots of parasites, lots of pathogens are found in bats. The normal explanation is that bat is a very unique mammal where no other mammal occupies that aerial mode of life. But compared to birds, bats have much higher kind of a accumulation and concentration of uh, pathogens within them. And now, when the SARS-CoV-2 jumped from a bat to humans, now it has a free ride. It travels all over the place, and it got a very high population size and very high spatial uh, you know uh, distribution. And what would happen, all of which were considered descendants of a single lineage. And till July 2020, mid last year, the variations were very low. Only I think 4 or 5 variations were detected for the first 8 months of the first initial detection of SARS-CoV-2. So it was like a bottleneck where the population explosion, but very little variation. But by January 2021, this year, suddenly the diversity started to take place. So that is a worrying trend, because the biggest worry of viral like this sort of a pandemic would be, what if you come different waves comes with slightly more or differently virulent strains. So that is what the bigger concern now, where starting January, the global diversity has increased enormously, including the novel lineages, which are about 38 and coming more. And there are stories, even Sri Lankan versions are there as well, with intermediate forms of all these things. Some are probably rumors, some are true, and there are other things that those who know knows. So, and then now WHO also, as a response to that, urge countries to sequence as much as possible to capture the scale of this problem of rapid divergence of this virus. Because the biggest fear of divergence is that, what if the new variants actually would able to overcome the immunization process. So, okay, I'll keep that at bay for a second, and then so I'm coming back to the paper. Phylogenetic perspectives. Phylogenetic perspectives play a role in this sort of especially new life forms. This virus is in a technically terms, a new life form, because it's a burrowed life form which has some elements of bat coronaviruses, small few elements from the pangolin in the beginning. The thought was that. So early phylogenetic studies showed that the SARS-CoV-2 emergence involved recombination between bat and pangolin coronaviruses as a result of these close contact. And then the detection of coronaviruses in many host species like raccoons, dogs, minks, and so on, with their propensity to recombine, emphasized that co-infection could facilitate recombination between viruses, various potentially distinct coronaviruses, and that generate novel viruses and pandemics in the future as well. And I mean, this paper doesn't talk about that much, but this propensity to add or borrow genetic genomic features from neighboring populations, causing a lot of concerns, I think, in the future for the evolutionary aspect of controlling this disease. And this is the earlier version. This is Wu et al. This was published. Sorry, I mean, I forgot to add the citation. This is January 2020. This is one of the first phylogenetic trees showing that bat cove is closely related to SARS-CoV-2 is closely related to bat coves, and it's not closely related to SARS-CoV, which was previously had affected people. And then yeah, I have to mention this. Last week, Idea Lab, Tejani Pereira, Sahan, and then Yapasa, and then Premansa sir and Premansa madam, Inoka, Vipula Yapasa. So there's our own Idea Lab team published a paper, and they are showing that the Miniopterus and the Rosetta's lecionality. If you don't know Rosetta's lecionality, stay till about 6:30 p.m. in the quadrant where the lapwings breeding, and you will see them. They are coming during the olives, willows fruiting. They come and feed. They are very common. One of the probably the commonest mammal in the University of Colombo premises is Sinopterus and Rosetta's lecionality. So it's a very common bat even in our context. So they are showing that in Vaulgalge they have beta coronaviruses, and beta coronaviruses are the close related ones. And this is some of the work from Anoli, our fourth year student, and Shanika, a bioinformatics student from the plant sciences. She's about to leave to her PhD in Toronto, and Anoli's work, and Charita and myself, we've done some work on the phylogenetic and evolutionary aspects of the COVID, and what we've seen is that these so the SARS-CoV-2 actually has very close affinities to some of the beta coronaviruses from bats, and I'm just continuing small aspect. So these beta coronaviruses are closely related to coronaviruses that are found in rhinolophid bats, and we have at least 2 species of rhinolophid bats in Sri Lanka, probably more, and very common. You can see them in Colombo as well. Anoli's work shows that these the epitopes are the ones that are like the beta coronaviruses that are found in bats, and some of the epitopes that the SARS-CoV-2 generate has a conservation, a higher conservation. That means they are kind of mimicking. So that might give some possibility of an existing remnant immunity in individuals residing in these areas where rhinolophus bats are native, like us, where like our long-term interactions of these bats and their coronaviruses, especially the beta coronaviruses, which is more common in Asia and in the old paleotropics, would have some mimicking remnant immunity to SARS-CoV-2. And SARS-CoV-2 won't go away and would go away, but there will be possibilities of new pandemics like this. And in such cases, these existing remnant immunity might play a role. So we are working on this publication So these ideas of evolution is actually a critical aspect when you design and when you forecast uh, vaccines and procedures and protocols for future pandemics. Adaptation and viral evolutionary success. So the viral adaptation reflects selective pressures operating across multiple scales, individual, population, and community scales. And this positive selection favors those that confer an adaptive advantage. The danger there is that with the immunization process now, the SARS-CoV-2 mutations in the spike proteins can alter viral fitness, and that could go into a dangerous kind of what you call areas where they could actually areas in the context in the scientific thinking wise, because the immune pressure, the selective pressure that the humanity gives into the virus through immunization and quarantine process would push the virus to come up with different strategies. That's the bad news. The good news is that the virus, through time, killing the host is a disadvantage for the virus. So with the very large population size and the very large host population size, the possibility of the virulence dropping and the virus becoming more of a symbiont, the opportunities are there as well. So in host populations, the selection favors viral variants that can transmit between hosts and propagate through the population, but with a lower virulence. Natural selection can drive the evolution of a trait that is later commended for a new functions. And in these motifs, if present in a coronavirus found in mammalian pangolins, but absent in other coronaviruses, the different forms some forms could reduce its virulence and won't kill the host and would be more successful. And some forms, like the ones that the one that found in this particular variant here, which is found in the coronavirus but absent in the pangolins, and then certain ones that are absent in the bat course but found in the pangolins, those borrowing of traits would create a more lethal, more problematic future variants that the humanity has to face. So the acquisition of these different motives may have functioned as an expectation that mediated transfer of the SARS-CoV-2 progenitor from wildlife to humans, back to humans to wildlife, and back and forth. So a broader take-home message in this context is that we have to give space for wildlife. We have to give space for forests. You can't convert every single forest into a chili plantation or a badayungu plantation so that we can earn a buck out of it. We have to give space for different life forms that had evolved millions of years in its own nature, because when you cross that boundaries, when you go into elephant corridors and elephant habitats, yes, we can easily kill the elephant and say that elephant came to the village, so we kill the elephant. But the problem, like in that example, elephant would not come as just one animal. Elephant would come as an army of pathogens, viruses, different bacteria, fungi, all kinds of things. And when we cross those boundaries, that would create these ecological and evolutionary effects where in certain cases new life forms can produce in this mixing, and that can the root cause of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic is that and we should not do that in the future. I mean, that is not mentioned in the paper, but this final figure in the paper actually showing that spatial ecology and how that consumer resources and adaptation and diversity plays out. The blue ones are the introduced variants, how the introduced variants would quickly change and replace the low fitness variants, and how the high fitness variants capture or the dominate in populations, and how those, and then movement of individuals, of host individuals, would transfer those dominant forms from one population to another, which eventually leads to a global pandemic, is schematically illustrated here. I think that's about it. They had a kind of a kind of a highlight kind of thing in the website as well, which is basically the kind of summarizing what I try to say over a year, over an hour now. So in a light, there's a debate between creationism and evolution, and one key point that the evolutionary, like people who support evolution and science says, is that the designing of vaccines is one key place where you can show evolution in action, and we are seeing the same evolution in action, or the sciences of evolution in action, in the fight against this pandemic. And the basic sciences, the value of basic sciences, value of not so sexy sciences like virology, and even some of the work that the molecular biologists do in the behind the scene, actually started to really highlight in this phenomenon. All right, over to you. I think Maheshi. Oh, my Preeti madam, if you want, can you run the discussion, please?
Thank you, Sampath, for that excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it. I want to also thank you for choosing this paper, because this sort of shows us the interlinkages between our honors specialities, right? The streams.
Yeah.
That I think is very, very important. IIMB with zoology as well as environment sciences. So thank you very much for that. Just one small question or other comment. So what does this whole thing mean, Sampath? So it means that we are going to have this virus for a while, isn't it? Overall, when we look at all these facts, with mutations, with spread, and then gradually going down in virulence, it's going to take some time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, madam, the one, there's different paths. Obviously, one, the like happy end would be that the virulence will drop as the population size goes up, because eventually the herd immunity that we always heard these days, the herd immunity, and the because the killing the host is a disadvantage for the pathogen. So the pathogen would over time, the variants that show less effects, like or asymptomatic like variant, like the virus, the variants that show less symptoms, or asymptomatic variants, would have the greatest advantage, because they can live in this population and do what they wanted to do without getting detected. So that is from the virus standpoint, that's the best story, and we also won't mind. Eventually, more, we have lots of pathogens with us, doing the same, and we are not too bothered by that. The problem with this the scenario where the coronaviruses right now is that there are so many coronavirus types, beta coronaviruses and alpha coronaviruses in the new world, in the tropical South Americas. Some are in Asia as well. So many different species of or variants of coronaviruses in the system, and they have this tendency of burrowing traits. So that is the worrying thing. This possibility there that highly virulent, highly like deadly combinations would emerge almost spontaneously because of very large population size. So that's a bad news. That's where we are.
Yeah, but eventually, Sampath, the good pathogen will not kill the host, no?
Exactly, madam. Yeah, but the problem is the good pathogen. While when you have so many good pathogens, there can be one good pathogen would borrow a bad
I know, I
segment, a
know.
genetic segment, and become a very bad pathogen. And then we have to start it all over again. That's where the problem. so
Right.
the
So,
so the solution for humanity is, we have to go back to where we were, where we have to respect boundaries of life. Like how dominant are we? That's the real question at the end of the day. We can have dogs at home, yes. We can have chicken at the chicken coop, yes. But we can't have everybody in our bedroom. I think at one point we have to understand that, and we have to keep wild animals in the wild,
yeah.
you know us in the village or in the city.
Yes, thank you, Sampath.
Yeah, thanks, madam. And small thing, I can see Devaka sir, Anil sir. Can you put some light onto this as well? I'm pretty sure you might understand certain things that I can't understand, and so as Inoka, if you are there, because those who are, you especially Devaka sir, since you are a cellular physiologist, you might certain things that I couldn't understand in the cellular physiology angle, you might should draw some light.
What are you specifically referring to, Sampath? In terms of what, what would you like me to comment about?
Sir, no, so basically, sir, your take on this, since
Oh, you mean
you are
the SARS virus?
background on you are from the both worlds, sir. I
Yeah, no,
believe.
from an evolutionary point of view, I think I tend to agree with what Preeti said. Generally, I think based on what we know of all these kinds of pandemics, when a species cross a host barrier, initially it's very virulent, it's very invasive, but I think if it is very virulent, then it pretty much is a self-destructive thing from evolutionary point of view. So the ideally it should reach some kind of equilibrium where the pathogen becomes uh, less virulent and try to stay in the host. Like, I mean, if you look at influenza virus that we have, probably the
Yeah,
initial stage would have been like this. It just happened so many hundreds of years ago. We have no records of what happened. But what I'm really confused about is the Spanish flu, which came 100 years ago. In 1 year, it just disappeared. But this one is behaving differently. So why did Spanish flu disappear after 1 year? Why didn't it, keep re-emerging? Versus why this thing is not going away? These are some of the questions that I have in my head, but I guess time will tell us more about it. Um, but I think from
and
evolutionary point of view, it should stabilize at some point of time. It'll
yeah. In
just
another small thing, since you mentioned Spanish flu, sir, another dangerous scenario would be what happened to HIV. HIV, it was a zoonosis, and then it totally came out as a very different form and started to spread, right? So, and then Ebola also started to come in different forms time to time. Sir. So those are with the changing hosts. You give extra unbelievable opportunities for these life forms.
I think this is a very good time to think about these all these basic research that is happening all around. I mean, they came to a bit of a limelight with this situation, I think, because all these the findings and the backgrounds are not things that would have been funded by the Sri Lankan government, anyways, right? Now,
Yeah.
when we look at all the basic stuff that people were building upon, um, those are things that the funding systems like ours wouldn't ever look at. Um, that's something I thought for a long time, because now even when the diagnostics came in, they always wanted our RT-PCR machines, which came in for absolutely for basic research work.
Mm.
um, right? I mean that whenever we applied for grants, they were always asking to which government, whatever it is aligning to. Um,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, nothing aligned in this particular situation.
Yeah, and okay, in the same light, I mean, when I started, campaigning and try to get the technology and funds for the satellite tagging programs about 3 years ago, obviously it is ornithology like Kurullo ne. It's a, what the hell, we have so many
Exactly.
problems in the country. You are worried about Kurullo, but then, but as soon as we start the satellite tagging program, the same month uh, came the first corona person. So then it's, so we need to know where these animals go, where these bird flu or whatever you are talking about, the next pandemic, where they come from and where they go from here. So then suddenly, yes, those basic, like nerdy research become mainstream political agendas. Right?
Exactly, exactly.
I'm Virosh. Uh, like I saw in a program like the 60 Minutes, which goes in Australia news. They told about the origin of the virus being in 2008, where they found 3 samples of now suspected COVID patients in minors. So, sir, what could the reason that it originated back then, but it became a global pandemic in 2020, as it suppose that 2008 origin is true?
I don't know whether I am the one to answer. Maybe, like, I don't know whether Tejani, Sahan, Idea Lab might have some better insights on that, right? I can have a explanation, but I wonder I think that's what Idea Lab do, right? Inoka or whoever. I think they would
Yeah,
have a
so
better answer.
we started looking at these things. I mean, there was a global program going on, though we were not a part of it. So that's why Sunil sir and Yapa sir brought the idea concept to Sri Lanka to start this network of laboratories, right? And then this started in 2017. I think in terms of coronavirus, what the question what was asked, I think all stars aligned at this particular condition to get it spread like this. um, because I mean sporadic cases are always there. Now that's
Yeah.
what Tejani is looking at, because there are unexplained diseases that people die of. These encephalitis patients that die of unknown causes. So there can be these kind of things going on in the background, but not. I mean, the stars have not aligned enough to get the disease spread out like this.
Yeah, and another, yeah, so our knowledge, because you don't the diagnosis of every dead corpse, it's not happening that way. So there's always a possibility of populations of pathogens to exist, and then yes, you said, said, things could suddenly, certain changes could support or favor the system. And there are other kind of alternative ideas there as well, like for example climate change and melting of glaciers, because the world is not always a cold place. Like like for example Antarctica was a lush humid rainforest once upon a time, not that far ago, 100 million years ago. So then it got freeze. So certain spores, certain, like there are all kind of crazy ideas. But mountain ranges, for example Kilimanjaro range, which is in the tropics but was a glacier till 2000, and I think 16 and 2016 if I'm correct. The glacier on top of Kilimanjaro, which is on the equator, actually melted away. So the whatever the dormant stage of forms of viruses or spores could reactivate. And there are different theories, especially with the climate change and the changing kinetic energy of the planet. Certain and then invasive species They all these actually in a way man-made, but drastic changes that we do to the environment actually create situations where otherwise restricted, rain restricted or limited life forms could go out of control.
Sampath sir, I have a small question too. I'm Sadhani, by the way. So about a fortnight ago, BBC reported something about a hybrid variant in Vietnam spike in the corona cases. A hybrid variant means a total recombination event of two strains, so it would be a whole new level, maybe. That's true.
I mean, it's a catchy word. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hybridization. I mean, the way it sounds very catchy and sounds very new, but life all the time borrows information from closely related or sometimes not so closely related life forms. We call it the term for that is that that in a phylogenetic tree, if you think it like a phylogenetic tree, the information can move along the branches, but then you can go horizontal gene flow, horizontal transfers, where you can cross through hybridization or through burrowing or through reproduction, or like a wrong spore or a wrong pollen could fall in a wrong flower, and the offspring can come. And kind of an old misconception is that these sort of things are sterile, but what we know is that even like advanced life forms like birds, about 16% are hybrids in the species that we know of. So that is very formed, very high end kind of life form. So when you think of like a simpler life forms like viruses and bacteria and all, these horizontal gene flows or transfer of information, different related or unrelated organisms are very common. So I mean, you can call it hybridization, but see, so like that. So anyway, the information can get passed. The problem is if the wrong dangerous information or dangerous combinations put together, then you have the problem. That's where the wet market problem comes, because when you put all kinds of highly stressed dying animals in one table and let them live for another like a day or two, you are creating these odd kind of combinations in a much more rapid manner, where millions of years of evolution would not have that opportunity. You see, so but these things happen, yes. And climate change, another thing, because otherwise you will be in a colder place or a warmer place, and through climate change, suddenly you change the environment so that now new opportunities can create new life or invasive species in the same way. That particular form of viruses or pathogens would never see in that particular environment till an invasive species comes with a package of viruses or pathogens or pests, insect pests or whatever. See, so these changes actually create these, you can call it hybrids, these new mix variants. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir, Sampath sir.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, this is a bit of maybe outside the things we discussed today, and sorry about the ignorance. So, so it is clear that it is kind of a interdisciplinary sort of thing that links almost all the things that like in the fields that we are related, like immunology, ecology, likewise. So, sir, at present, what are the kind of technologies they use, like maybe the applications or any kind of machines or technologies? What kind of technologies are used in this sort of studies? And what is the situation in Sri Lanka? And what is the situation in the global context? Thank you, sir.
Good. That's a very good question, Uresha. It's actually, I think, I mean, you asked a really good question, really, because you know what happened, because of the urgency and the dire you know, dire need of knowing last year, you know, the first detection of this probable deaths and probable new disease was in, I think, I think 12th December was the first detection of this. By end of December 2019, WHO recognized officially, in terms of what we know, some problem, and then by January there started to come different papers, phylogenies, whether, you know, alternate ideas, whether this is a human constructed one disease or not, and so on, right? And then what happened very quickly, by I think end of January and early February, all the scientific work and data and all that coming out on COVID-19 become a public, put onto public domain. So what happened, because, like, you know, I'm answering your question in a different light here. So a lot of information started to come onto the public, very kind of different in some fields. Like, for example, environmental field, that's a different, it's normally not happening. But in the genetics and molecular biology field, it started to happening anyway, because of the, you know, GenBank and Droid, and there are an Ensemble, and there were data repositories that that is happening in that particular way. But what happened, so regardless of the technique that you use, whether it's a simple PCR based genotyping, or whether it is a little bit more advanced GBS, like genotyping by sequencing, like next generation or second generation based sequencing, or whether it is PacBio or smart sequencing, like third generation based, like, you know, really parallel large data generation, that data started to come into the public domain in a much rapid rate. And then, so that's one angle of technology being used, like, you know, simple PCR, Sanger sequencing to second generation sequencing to third generation sequencing. And also at the same time, there were new other areas started to develop, the need for a vaccine. So the development of vaccines is another whole different thing, like cloning, and then, you know, testing. And yesterday, Jean Godel was telling, like, you know, thousands of monkeys being used, according to her, very inhumane way in this process, because you have to have a rapid vaccine to come out. So that's another technology. So who builds vaccines? Doctors don't create vaccines. Mostly engineers, you know, like, you know, chemists, and then, you know, and then economists, you know, there's a lot of money, and related instruments has to be, you know, aligned. So it's a very highly interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary thing. So what kind of instruments use? All kind of instruments, but it's a human brain, right? The power of imagination comes into place, and information. So the information started to be public, and most of the companies actually didn't go for patenting as a service to humanity. So that all these helps. So you know, otherwise restrictive, like places like patenting, lack of information, especially variations, like, you know, different countries, different regions would have different variations. But those, like, when Anoli wanted to look into, when we designed to look into the spatial variations of the COVID-19, so we decided, okay, 15 individuals from South America, 15 individuals from Europe, 15 individuals from Asia, 15 from Sri Lanka, 15 from Australia. And I said, okay, why not 15 from Africa as well? Because Africa is an interesting continent for many reasons, in biogeographic and human genetic standpoint. And she would able to get whole genomes from any way we want, 15 and 15, 16 and 16, 25 and 25, because there were so many full sequences available. And this is kind of, you know, like so without spending a cent, we had whole genomes of multiple individuals from all continents we want. So that powered the whole mechanism of finding vaccines finding procedures, and now tackling new variants. So all kinds of, like, from biomedical sciences to, I saw even Dr. Mahis of University of Colombo had published a paper on socio-economic aspects of COVID-19. I think I'm correct. I saw it yesterday. So a sociological angle, stress, education, security, public safety. So all, I mean, this is a classic case where the real, these silos, අපි මේ හදාගෙන ඉන්න මේ බොරු zoology කියලා, botany කියලා, molecular biology කියලා, when it comes to life, it's life. These are life sciences and problems of life sciences, and we are also a living organism. So whatever, which direction you talk about, whether it's art or politics or economics or theoretical sciences or maths, it's all related. And so your question is very valid, but it's very hard to say this instrument would solve the problem or this particular tool would fix the problem. But when thousands of smart people from various backgrounds come into, when sit together or start thinking about a problem, the answers are coming. And we can see that there's 217 million doses of vaccines been already given in a span of 1.5 years.
Thank you, sir. Well understood, sir. Thank you very much.
I saw Himali. Since you are a
Yes, yes.
person, Himali or Tejani, you might, could you please tell us more about why bats are so important in these problems or something like that? I'm always puzzled why bats come into play all the time whenever you are talking about bats and birds. Flying things seems like causing a lot of pandemics in the global scale.
So if Himalayas is not around, I think I could add something for that.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the bats, there are some interesting publications on why bats are having more pathogens than all the other mammals or the birds. So thing is, actually, bats and all the viruses in there in bats have a really nice balance, symbiotic action going on. Because the bat's immune system is actually more like adapted to flying. So they waste more energy, and they damage their DNA, and they actually waste more energy on flying. So the immune system is actually more dialed down to compensate that. So
Okay, yeah.
viruses have found the advantage of that, and they live through that. So basically, they don't damage the bat, but in the same way, immune system doesn't actually go on to extreme ends because it's already dialed down.
Knock that down.
Yes.
So I see. Okay,
So
but
actually,
like, Sahan, the birds, you can't have a sick bird, because if you are a bird and if you get sick, you die, because you can't fly, because flying is so energetically expensive. So you can't be sick and living if you are a bird.
yes,
So
yes.
don't that apply to bats as well?
That actually applies, but the thing is, they don't feel sick. They can have the
so
virus
they're carriers. They're
Yes,
carriers.
they're just good carriers, and they don't feel sick. They just can have up to certain extent of viruses in them until they can either if the virus comes up, the bat dies, or if the immune system works on that, the virus dies. But that in bats, that's actually in really nice balanced system, so the bat don't die, and also the virus doesn't die. So it's a really nice system. There are some really nice papers actually explain, and they have found how certain systems in the certain molecules in the immune system in bats respond to these external stimuli from the external signals from the pathogens. So some of them are actually dialed down when compared to humans, like 10 times or 15 times dialed down of the, I mean, the reaction is dialed down, so they don't respond to that signal in the same way as humans. So that gives the way of viruses to live in the bat and doesn't damage, and as well as the virus doesn't damage the bat, and bat doesn't damage the virus. So it's really nice. Yes. So basically, they carry around the viruses, and that's actually why they have more pathogens or viruses, and that's why actually bats come into play in most of the viruses cases as well.
Very interesting.
So it's really interesting, sir. And as well, sir, since you talked about Ebola as well, I think you talked about the virus's capability of, I mean, if something wants to live, it should not harm the animal, the host actually, right, sir?
Yeah,
so that's the main thing. So if it is harming the host, it doesn't spread that much. So basically, it has to have a really nice balance in between to spread and also like keep spreading, right? So in Ebola, sir, Ebola, sir, the last thing, the current ongoing Ebola epidemic in Africa, as far as I remember, it's DRC. It was actually they suspect that the first patient from this epidemic there is actually from a person who got infected few years back and had the virus dormant inside inside that person. And it's actually really interesting how the virus works. And like, if you want to spread, you can actually stay dormant and come back in another time.
I mean, even in this paper they were talking about the reason for like a sudden appearance of variations in COVID-19, or like SARS-CoV-2, also some partly to attribute to these dormant phases.
Yes, sir. So it's actually, we actually don't know what could happen. And like for Hiroshma's question as well, we see it might have some cases of COVID in 2008, but as Inogo said that that it's actually didn't have all the things aligned to spread. So it's always the time that it comes out, and we have to
and the recombination recombinations. I mean, that is all plays a role as well, because you can have a very innocent like combination of innocent viruses, or any, for that matter, any pathogen, and then suddenly like a stroke of bad luck, or could mix a wrong like two like wrong combinations, and suddenly you have a deadly combination in place, right?
Exactly, sir. And even in Sri Lanka as well, we are actually living you might be having some new data coming from our group as well in recent future. So we are actually in Sri Lanka, we are living also with some few viruses, but we are lucky that we already don't have anything going on, or we already have seen them in past, and we have already get our immune systems ready for them. We don't know that. So
and then other thing along that line, there are taboos, right? Across the globe there are some certain animals are not eaten, like for example in like monkeys, in most communities, like great apes were not being eaten for till recent past, because they were considered like a taboo, like like dirty. And then certain cultures, the pigs won't eat, and then certain cultures snakes, like that. So sometimes these taboos also help keep maintaining these
the limits.
boundaries.
Yes, sir. Yes,
limits, boundaries. And then, but the problem is that now one after another, we ourselves break these taboos, or these social norms, and that also create unwanted, exposure,
Interactions,
right?
yes, sir. Yeah.
Interactions, right? Yeah. All right,
Okay.
Mahesh, over to you.
Okay, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for that very interesting talk, like delivering like really good talk, and for inspiring us to understand this relevance of ecological and evolutionary aspects of this prevailing pandemic. And you did a really amazing job, like having all these eye issues and all. So thank you very much for your enthusiasm and for encouraging us also to involved in these sessions. So, and also I would like to thank you all the active participation and interaction with lots of questions and comments. The audience, I would like to thank you, the audience as well.